sky's not blue.
You need to understand that when the time comes, I'm going to be taking over.
Welcome back to the Cult House Podcast. I'm your host, the Scholar of Spite and the Saturday Night Delight, Roger Riddell. Joining me today, he is the enigmatic entity behind the surreal and sensational sermon. He is the man known only as Him. How are you doing today, Him?
That was a really nice intro.
Oh,
Thank
thanks.
you very much. I like being called enigmatic. That's wear that on my sleeve more often. But I'm very well. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm glad that we were finally able to get this lined up.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Was last week, wasn't it? I was really yeah, it was just really ill. Just like, you know, the kind of ill where you don't know whether you're alive or dead, and you can't think. Yeah, it was like that. So it'd be really terrible for a conversation like this, or maybe not.
Well, I'm glad that you're feeling better either way. You've got a new album coming out Friday of Golden Verse. And I've had a chance to listen to it for the last 2 weeks, and I have to say it's one of my favorite albums that I've heard this year so far. It might be my favorite album that I've heard this year so far. Like I was impressed that it can go from this sort of ambient, atmospheric, sort of meditational kind of vibe to the soaring, like cacophonous maelstrom of just like a wall of sound, just like back and forth. And it's just got so much there's so much variety in just like the construction of everything in it.
That's really nice. I bet you say that to all your guests, don't you? But no, that's really kind of you to say. It's very strange that it's coming out this week, because I've been waiting for this for maybe nearly 2 years, and it's agony for it to just sit there and not be heard. And that's the ego in me. But I think it's sort of also part of, like, you do these. It takes a lot of pain and effort to do this, and as much as I do it for myself, for it not to be heard is really, really agonizing. So yeah, it's really nice of you to say that, because I've been living within my brain, not knowing if it's actually any good or not.
Yeah, I mean, I joke a lot that you can always tell that someone who is reviewing, an album or a film, you can tell that they really liked it by how many $10 words they pull out, because that's sort of the mark of the criticism world, of feeling the need to make your description of something that you really like sound that much more smart and thoughtful.
I love that $10 word thing. I'm gonna steal that. That's a good descriptive. That's good descriptive. Certainly in the industry my real life operates in, I think a lot of people use a lot of $10 words. So yeah, thank you for that. That's great.
Yeah, and Sermon's one of the first bands that I've really heard in a long time that, upon first hearing it, my immediate thought was, what is this? Like, there's so few of those experiences as you kind of like progress further into life, because, you reach a point where you feel like you've kind of like basically seen or heard a lot of a little bit of everything at some point, but like now it stands out that much more when I hear something that also, my immediate thought is just like, what is this? So I guess to that effect, what exactly is Sermon? Because I've had a lot of trouble just like trying to describe the band to other people.
Yeah, we had the same problem with when we were doing the press kit with the label and people just deciding what actually is this. I just think it's extreme metal, honestly. And by extreme I don't just mean it has to be blasting. It as you say, it kind of goes, it's quite ambient and quiet, but then it can be really visceral and really heavy. So I'd categorize it as extreme metal, but it's not good enough for some people, so they need like 10 subgenres to describe it. Some people would call it prog metal. I don't really give a shit about time signatures or noodly riffs, and but I do like mellotrons, and I drown everything in mellotron. So that kind of is a bit proggy, and I do love Camel and King Crimson and ELP and all those old geezers if they're alive. So it could, there's basically, it's a mix of things. That's the best way, because it's part prog, it's part metal. I think a lot of the inspiration of songs comes from pop music a lot of the time. Like, Senescence is directly inspired by Michael Jackson's Earth Song. So it's got a bit of everything. Yeah, it's hard to describe, but it's regal and heavy, and I think listenable as well.
Yeah, I mean, the pop sensibility of the songwriting really stuck out to me too, because when I was really trying to kind of figure out how I would describe it, I let a friend listen to it who metal isn't really like her preference for music generally, but she enjoyed it. She was like, "This is really catchy and good."
I don't think my girlfriend would listen to it, to be honest. But I think if she did, I would be selective with what songs I showed her. It would probably be The Distance or Senescence, because they are listenable, and they kind of hold your hand a bit, but they've still got some heavy bits. So I think it's my goal, actually. I would like people who don't like metal to like Sermon more, maybe, than metalheads. I think I'd care more about that conversion in a way.
Yeah, I mean, the songs that I had showed her were Light the Witch and Golden, and those might be two of my favorite tracks off of the album.
Yeah, Golden's my favorite song, I think. I do that. I'm proud of the chorus on that. I had it in my head for months and months, which is a good sign, because it never leaves. But in that song, that's quite a proggy song, because while I had a catchy chorus, I wanted the structure to just sort of cascade up. I wanted it to be a constant crescendo almost. I didn't want it to just be the same chorus again and again. So I wanted the riffs to sort of change underneath the singing in a way. That chorus lyric. But yeah, I love that. I'm really proud of that song.
Yeah, and the closing song, The Distance, I believe, right?
Oh, Departure.
Oh, The Departure, yes.
Yeah. I can barely remember the names of the songs either. But yeah, that's a pretty savage tune.
Yeah, that one, I know as much as you all get compared to like Tool and Katatonia, that one kind of reminded me a little bit of Mastodon because of the ongoing sort of blast beat, but then it had that sort of kind of like the psychedelic surreal kind of sound going over along with that.
Yeah. Fair comment. Yeah, I actually wish they released that song as maybe the second single, because I think The Distance was maybe it lived up to that kind of Tool Katatonia comparison. But actually, quite a few of the songs on there aren't really like that. Wait the Silent, I think, is not very Katatonia-y Tool. Senescence, sort of Opeth-y maybe, but actually it's Michael Jackson, which is not something I should really wear proudly on my sleeve, considering that man's history. he could write a good song.
Yeah, it seems that, everyone that a lot of highly successful artists kind of have this dark side, a little bit of skeletons in their closet that we find out about years later.
It's yeah, it's almost not if, it was just whether they get found out or not. It's almost a guarantee, sadly, that they were that abusive, which is, yeah, it's pretty awful to think about.
So yeah, I've heard you in other interviews describe the mask as a sort of armor for when you're
Mm.
performing, and something that really stood out to me about that is this Jack Nicholson quote that I've heard over the years, where he talks about wearing sunglasses, at all hours of the day for the same reason, because he had this whole idea that the eyes are the window to the soul, so you're protecting yourself from people that you don't want to let in on that level.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, it is a. I wonder what I've do you know, I've never unpacked it, but it does feel like armor. I think maybe it's easier for the mask to take the blame for my lack of ability. Maybe, if it was on stage and I did something wrong, I think I could live with the mask taking the fall for that rather than myself. It was a cowardly thing, really, but at the same time, it works.
Yeah, I always kind of wonder for, performers who wear masks, if there's a sort of layer of that also allowing them to feel that much more comfortable and uninhibited in their expression of, what they're trying to get out on stage.
There is also that, if what's underneath this mask is a very boring man, and he doesn't really belong on stage, honestly. So having something that kind of does belong on stage is really helpful. I think it gives you a confidence that I've never experienced with anything else. So yeah, the mask has to stay, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, to make a sort of lighter comparison to that, I'm a big comics guy, and Spider-Man's one of my favorites. And so his thing with that character is that outside of the mask, he's the timid and shy Peter Parker, just boring, everyday, run-of-the-mill New Yorker. But he puts the mask on and he feels free to, laugh in the face of death when he's, fighting these, super powered individuals.
It's exactly that, except without any of the bravery for me.
And how much thought went into the design of the mask?
So actually, it was going to be very different. I might release it someday, but basically, I had a prosthetics artist create almost more like Ghost. It was more like a skin, but it was a golden skin, and it was full head, and it went over me down onto my shoulders, and it just I looked like a different person, and the face was modeled on Paul Newman. I tend to look really handsome, and like, well, we can't use someone like Brad Pitt because he's too in the public eye. And I was like, well, maybe there's someone in history, and he suggested Paul Newman, and I'm a heterosexual man, but that is a good-looking man. So on him. Unfortunately, though, it's a very expensive thing to do, and once it was done, it was too heavy, and it wasn't tight enough around my face, so I couldn't sing in it. So I can't use it. So I had to look elsewhere, and I was basically looking for. I needed something that I could almost that was ready made for me, because this mask came as something else entirely, and then I edited it basically. I destroyed it, I burned it, I used a drill and a saw, and I just tarnished it and then recolored it. Essentially, that's what. But it works quite well with the feel of the album. It's quite, as I said, it's quite a regal sounding album. but it's also really vicious, and I think the mask kind of does that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Ghost, just given the that you had previously mentioned, that you wouldn't mind being seen as sort of a gateway band to heavier music either, because I feel like that's kind of the role that they've come to inhabit as well, is that they are this really kind of accessible gateway that people get into them and then they sort of drift into heavier music if they really like that a lot.
I think that, yeah, and I mean, Tool for me did that when I was a kid. I think we've all got to start somewhere, and I think you're right. Ghost do fulfill that. I think people get annoyed at them because they think it's trying to look really evil more than it sounds. It sounds quite goofy and poppy. So I always think it's a bit strange when people are like, "Oh, they're not real metal band." It's like, I don't think they were ever trying. It just
Yeah.
sounds like ABBA had sex with Tony Iommi or something. For me, that's what it. And I think he's always worn it on his sleeve. But I guess if you've got a satanic pope fronting the band, you're always going to get a bit of flack from people who just think, it's not heavy enough.
Yeah, I mean, I always felt like it was, kind of obvious that they were tongue in cheek from the end of their first album cycle when they started that whole shtick of, killing off
Yeah,
whichever Papa Emeritus was the singer of the band before, they moved on to the next album.
yeah, yeah. I always, and even their description on Facebook, like it just says satanic pop, and you're like, that is what it is. And you know, I don't. It always blows my mind a bit when people get hostile towards it because I'm like, but, you know, that they're not even trying to do what you're suggesting that you think they are. Um, but yeah, I think they're a good band.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I think that it's kind of goofy. It's a kind of like goofy sort of argument along the same lines that people make when they try to um sort of write things off as being a gimmick, because ultimately everyone as an artist, like their modus operandi is ultimately a gimmick, even if their sort of statement is that they have no gimmick. Not having a gimmick is their gimmick.
Well, like, look, let me put it this way, and I don't mean to throw anyone under the bus, but like with let's say like Vader, for example, when James did his first photo shoot with Vader, they made him buy a leather biker jacket because it's part of the getup, right? He didn't have one before that. It's all the same. Black metal, no one has a go at them for wearing corpse paint. It's a strange, it's very selective. It's a selective sort of anger, I'd say. But I understand why people get their backs up about a gimmick. Um, but like you say, I think it happens it doesn't matter what extent it happens. It's in everything, really. I know I'm bracing myself for an eye rolling, not another masked band kind of thing. I can see it coming. It's fair enough. It really is. But it's just too damn useful to me now. And I'm not the same mastermind as Tobias from Ghost. Like I genuinely, to pull off what he pulls off is honestly, I really admire it. Even if it's an extraordinary vision, and I have no idea how he managed to pull it all off because it's like a full scale pantomime that he takes on the road. It's amazing. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, they've gone all in on just doing an entire lore around that band where it's kind of similar to the lore that like Guar has built around themselves, where they've got like an entire galaxy of like different characters and planets and villains.
Haven't they got a comic book?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Again, they've been doing it since they were the first, really, weren't they? I mean, they were. I mean, it's not Slipknot, but it's kind of like monstrous beings on the stage, and they've been doing it since what, like the early 80s?
Yeah, I think they started around like 81 or 80 or something like that.
That's just honestly, it's astounding. It's really amazing. So in that sense, they're goofy, but it's fun, and I really, I really admire it. I think it takes so much commitment to do, far more than I could be bothered to do. Um, yeah, no, I have nothing but admiration for it, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, when it comes to any kind of showmanship, whether it's, a mask or everyone in the band having like, leather biker jackets or everyone having corpse paint, I always kind of think that that goes back to this concept that Bruce Dickinson described in his autobiography a few years ago, where, as a performer, and particularly in metal, and I think also particularly, in pop, to a large degree, there's the desire of the performer to engage the audience in like the theater of the mind. Like you want to
Yeah,
transport them to this other place with your show and with your music and with the album art.
it needs, yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, and if you don't do it with like outfits, you need to have some kind of stage show. Like Tool, Danny Carey's wearing a basketball jersey a lot of the time, and the other guy, one's wearing like a little waistcoat shirt, and then Nate Maynard's dressed as a like a what they like riot police or something. But the visuals around it are really united, and it really transports you into a different place. I think the sheer scale of it just really, it's mesmerizing, and I think that's important. I think we will do a similar thing when it comes to live. It will start off small at first, but the goal would be to make it quite cinematic, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I always joke that Tool shtick is that they've been able to convince their biggest fans that by virtue of listening to Tool, they understand the Pythagorean theorem and the golden ratio.
Yeah, I mean, I probably would never have known what those things were if it wasn't for that. I one thing actually that they do that not a lot of other people do that I think is really genius is they build their own mystique by sort of like not really talking a lot. And I think that's really brave. I don't think we could do that. I couldn't. I think we have to, I have to talk as much as possible really to, get the attention, which sounds really superficial, but it's sort of an important part of the release cycle. Whereas I think they're just like, no, don't need to talk about anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated that that band can stay dormant for, half a decade or longer, and people remain interested in just the idea that they might be doing something.
Yes, and it's. I mean, they knocked Taylor Swift out of the charts when Fear Inoculum was released, which is a pretty monumental occasion for, even if you don't like Tool, it's quite a moment for heavy music, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they put a lot of thought and sort of imagination into what their album packaging is too, and that's something that I've always appreciated with pretty much any band. But like, I know the Fear Inoculum album, when it came out, I'm still like buying CDs all the time because, when the vinyl thing happened, when it came back, several years ago, I initially thought, I could do this because the art is a lot bigger, it's more fun to look at, but I've already got like 300 albums on CD, and because the way that my mind works, the minute that I start buying vinyl, I'm going to want to replace all 300 of them, and it's going to be really expensive and take up a lot of space. So I bought the CD version of Fear Inoculum, and that had this little like digital screen in it, and you open the package and it immediately starts playing this sort of psychedelic like graphics video.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. That was like that. It must have cost a fortune to do. I mean, I find actually out of the two, because I do all the artwork for Sermon, and laying things out in CD is much harder than vinyl. Vinyl, you can get actual space and you get more of a sequence to it, and so it's easier to basically like put things on a page. Whereas with CD, you have to like make everything really tiny and all the text is like bunched up, and yeah, it's much harder, I'd say. But I mean, I think even in a way, does it not sound better? Am I saying something like outrageous there? That actually vinyl, the quality isn't, it's warmer, but it's not, the fidelity is less, right? Or am I
Yeah.
lying?
No, because I feel like I've heard before the quality of the sound on the vinyl, like over time, with
Mm.
repeated play, like it kind of goes downhill because the vinyl doesn't age as well as a CD might.
Yeah, I mean, I'd only really heard the new album on digital, and then I got a test press of it, and I have to say it did sound pretty. There's a sense of space, and maybe it's the setup, um, but the vinyl sounded really good. But as you say, it probably diminishes over time. So just buy two copies, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of things that I own in multiple formats because I just like love them that much. And the thing that always I think jumps out the most in my mind that's the most ridiculous is probably the original Star Wars trilogy because of
Oh
the VHS and then the DVDs and then the
yeah.
Blu-rays.
Yeah, I remember having I remember having the VHS myself. It was in like a little had like we didn't even have like a plastic but it was like a little cardboard sleeve, the ones we
Yeah.
had. Yeah. They didn't I don't think they survived to this day.
Yeah, I think in the VHS days you really only got the little plastic boxes if you were like a I mean, I guess Star Wars is a family film, but like if you were like a full-on family film, usually those came in the
Mm.
plastic clamshells.
Do you ever remember it only came back to me. Do you remember when you get VHS tapes and they were double-sided? Do you remember that? And you could flip it over and then because if it was like a long film like Titanic or something, you'd have to flip the tape over because it couldn't store 3 hours of film on.
I
Do you
remember
remember?
Titanic having two tapes.
Oh, see, I swear there was maybe I'm inventing that, but
Maybe they had different formats on each side of the Atlantic.
maybe, maybe, yeah. Anyway,
I do remember for a little bit in 2004, 2005, the record industry was pushing the idea of dual disc, where one side of an album was a CD and then you could flip it over, and the other side would be maybe bonus tracks or it would be a DVD with some music videos on it. And that was around for like a year, I think.
oh, I did, yeah, never. That's gone way over my sphere. Yeah, I don't think that ever. I was not aware of that at all. That would have been cool.
Yeah, I remember buying because of that, I bought two copies of Nine Inch Nails with Teeth because the normal CD was for the car, because I didn't want to, mess up one side of a dual disc, pulling it in and out of the car CD player all the time. And then the dual disc was for at home. And like the one side of it was just the normal CD album, then the other side was a DVD and had a 5.1 surround mix of the album on it.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's top. That's top notch stuff. That premium.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't. I never really understand the 5.1. I've tried listening to it before. I remember getting Opeth Still Life in 5.1, and no, um, it just didn't sound right. The drums sound really weird. It felt empty, but yeah, there's the new one, isn't there? Dolby Atmos. I saw a talk with Stephen Wilson doing that. Um, yeah, I guess I'm not much of an audiophile, you know. I'm just like just stick it in my ears and just I might like it.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned that you do all of the artwork for the sermon albums. One of the things that really stuck out to me about the artwork for Of Golden Verse, and it ties back to what you had said about it also having sort of a regal sense to it, was the choice of the golden designs on top of this sort of royal red background.
Yes, I actually did that because yeah, it does look a bit regal, but I did it because it was the opposite in some ways of the last album. And in my brain, I felt like not many bands that I've seen in the genre that we might get sort of lumped with would ever have a red background on their photos. So it's my way of trying to cheat to get a little bit of attention, or at least to be imprinted into people's brains a bit more. But yeah, I thought the red and the gold is like a classic. That's like a classic color for the, I guess, that sort of imperial look.
Yeah, I mean, it's immediately eye-catching.
Yeah, I think it does break up the the all black or all kind of like dirgy kind of colors of metal records. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can think of any other red. Maybe Queens of the Stone Age, because that's pretty much the only one I can think of that comes to mind. But yeah, I just think color's quite a good tool to just sort of get some attention. Maybe we'll try like a neon pink one next time.
Well, then you might have confusion then, because you go by him, but then the band Him had Razorblade Romance, and that was a hot pink album.
Oh, damn it. He's already
so before the pandemic happened, you were able to play one show live. Do you have any plans to do any more live shows in the near future?
I really, if we get some quality offers, which means we can actually, get out there and I can pay the guys, for playing the show, then yeah, absolutely. I think we're looking to do a London show at some point because we can do that for nothing. But the problem is a lot of the time, and I just said it actually did a podcast just before this. The problem is that we'll get offers of doing European tours and stuff, but then they'll be like, oh yeah, it's £15,000 to buy on the bus, which actually is quite good value for a month of travel and accommodation. But I don't have £15,000, so I can't really do that tour. Sorry. So as much as I would like to, I could buy a house with what people are asking us to do. So it's not until we get something more realistic, it's going to be very difficult to do.
And do you ever worry that, if you do more live shows, it'll become a lot more difficult to maintain the anonymity that you have right now as well?
No, I think if I got found out, I'm okay with that. In fact, I've seen people try and tag my real name in it already anyway. It doesn't matter because I can just deny it, And even if I'll just do the old President Trump, just deny it all, and even people are like watching me do it. My name's actually Pete, which it is. Or my name's Andrew. I'll just do that. It's easy to do.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, the going back to, we were talking about Ghost earlier, and this is just kind of another tie to the anonymity piece, is that's a really good example of a band that I feel like, as much as I still enjoy them, I enjoyed them a lot more when there was the anonymity about who are these people and, like, who's actually in the band. Because I remember early on there were rumors that, there were session players in the band that ranged from everyone from Fenriz to Dave Grohl. And like now all of that's kind of out of the window for those guys. So
Yeah.
it takes a little bit of the mystique away from it.
Yeah, it does. I agree. The mystique is really nice, actually, and I believe they had like code names and stuff to like try and get into dressing rooms, and the effort of that is just just thinking about it is tiring. And I could put on a strange voice right now and make up a whole backstory, but it's just too hard to lie, and it makes conversations like this really difficult to be sincere. So and it kind of ruins the whole point of the look of this, because you're just talking to some British idiot who's really just a boring guy, but who sits in his toilet and in a mask, and that ruins the overall effect of it. But it's just too hard to lie, honestly. I'd rather just be sort of almost entirely open, except for my name.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of gets all the way back around to the sort of where the line is drawn between, at what point does something go from being art to being gimmick, where if there's like all the effort into it, where there's like the fake voice and all of that, I think that there's like this weird kind of like thin line where people are willing to accept something as art versus when they feel like it's become too much of just the gimmick, for lack of a better term.
Yes, it's a. The thing is, I think you would have to be a bit foolish to not expect some kind of resistance to this, like wearing something like this. I mean, from anyone. My girlfriend fucking hates it, and it's because it's embarrassing in a way, but it just feels like the right thing to do as well. So I don't really care. Like if people wouldn't listen to it because of the mask, that's up to them. And I get why you wouldn't, but I think, well, if that's the way you would approach everything, I think you miss out on a lot, honestly.
Yeah, and when Birth of the Marvelous came out, I know that it also got a lot of rave reviews at the time. How did that impact in any way the way that you approached of Goldenverse?
Sorry, say that again.
Oh, so when Birth of the Marvelous came out, it got a lot of rave reviews at the time. So I was wondering if that initial feedback to the first album impacted your approach when it came to making the second album, because it's also, there's a lot that happened in the time in the middle there.
I don't think it's not. It was nice to read positive things, but it didn't really affect the way I wrote the new one, because I'd been writing it before Birth of the Marvelous even came out. That's not to say that, like, I've seen criticisms of it too, and I agree with everything they were saying. Actually, like, I can really see your point of view. I get why you like. I saw one comment. Some guy was like, "This isn't good drumming. This is just the same thing again and again." I'm like, "Yeah, it is. It is exactly that." And I can see that point of view, and it's just a preference thing, because if you just want constant change in music, I can understand why that's frustrating. But sermons actually is more about building on a motif, so it's about building the rhythmic pulse and getting you to the end with something like a climax. And that's what it's really about. And so it doesn't really affect what I do. I don't really think about, like, people enjoying that one, I better write it again, or another one like it. I'm not saying what we've got is vastly different. It's more of a streamlining of it, I think, and it's more aggressive, it's more riffy. I'd say it's more guitar orientated than the first album is. But it's more of a one step forward rather than a side step, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely, picked up on just the overall idea of the album building on a motif throughout too, because it does feel like each song builds upon the last one and is sort of um it kind of like makes sense as it progresses through, where you're like, yeah, I understand why this is the next track and like what the whole sequence of the thing is. It all just kind of like flows very well.
It's actually that's really part of like, so my trick, like, because some people I think will, if I'm being honest, I think people would just get impatient with the segue songs that help to bridge them together. But that's the way I listen to music, and so it was important for me to put them in there. Um, and I imagined it live. Those segues is a band playing. It's not just a guy on a keyboard pressing a note and it's just a big sound. That's a build of. It's almost like a jam. So that's the way I listen to music. So it takes a lot of thought to get it from one song to the other, but it tends to be like, if we're going to take you into a soft song, the song previous to it has to kind of wind down to get to it, if that makes sense. There's not many sharp turns. It kind of flows you back in. So that's my goal, really. I try to think of it as an album, less as a good song, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I mean, the way that I have always preferred to listen to music too is to listen to an album as a whole, because I feel like the best albums tell you a story from start to finish.
Yes, I agree. I'm exactly the same.
Yeah, and I think I've heard before that you actually like wrote all of the songs, in the sequence that they ran too.
That's correct. It's all written chronologically. Um, and that's because I prefer to listen to music that way. And it's easier to feel what needs to come next that way, rather than being like, oh, I've got this song over here. I want this kind of song. I knew I wanted a song with blast beats in, but I didn't know where it was going to go. And then it just, by the time I'd finished Golden, I was like, there's only one way we can go. The end of Golden's really fast and kind of heavy, but it's not as heavy and as fast as a blast beat. So that's what has to happen next. And yeah, so I find it easier to structure things that way. I'm not sure whether I'll do that next time. Maybe it'll be different, but it made sense this time around.
Yeah, because I was wondering if that sort of I guess almost sort of narrative approach to songwriting, where you're doing everything chronologically and it all just kind of ends up forming this story. It's almost like it's a concept album without being a concept album, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah, it is. It's not got a single narrative, but everything, it's a collection of observations under the same idea, essentially. So it's a concept, not concept album, really.
It only makes the whole thing that much more enigmatic.
I'm gonna really like this word, but as soon as you start describing yourself as that, you just kind of lose the enigma. So
Yeah, it's
fair.
it's one of those words that if other people describe you as it sounds great, but then if you describe yourself as it, you just sound like you're full of yourself.
Yeah, I'm an enigmatic man. I think no enigmatic man would ever have to say that. Like, I couldn't imagine Obama doing that. But the man was enigmatic. But if he was to say it, he'd plummet.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, just in that sense that Obama couldn't do that with like the word enigmatic, but then you have these sort of tough guy authoritarians who have no problem describing themselves as tough guys all day, regardless of whether the shoe actually fits.
I saw I saw a picture the other day actually of I think it was on Reddit maybe, and it was a guy in a gas station, and he had like 4 gun holsters, like 2 on his body and like 2 strapped to his legs. And I just, that's not, to me, that's not tough, because you could just shoot someone and that's what makes you tough. You're not like Don Fry, who could just like rip your spine out or something. But you've got to be pretty self-conscious to wear 4 guns to a gas station. I mean, Jesus. He was wearing like shorts as well. It's just like, it's just this. I've never seen a more self-conscious man, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I have to wonder, at some point, if someone's wearing 4 guns at one time, who exactly are they pissing off in their daily life that they feel that they need to do this? Because, at some point it's a you problem, not a them problem.
Totally. It makes it too easy to start something much worse than it ever had to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that people escalate very quickly under certain circumstances.
Well, I'd argue that having a gun puts you in the frame of mind where you think you have to escalate it. Just wearing it makes you feel kind of immortal. It
Yeah.
makes you vulnerable to anyone, and that in itself is a sort of quite a dangerous thing, I think, regardless of like whether you're actually going to use it or not. It just means you're always in that frame of mind into attack mode,
Yeah,
rather
I can
than
see that
like,
that added sense of additional sort of power.
yes, yeah. Doesn't happen so much in England, to be honest. Although we do have a knife crime problem, but
Yeah. It's a lot harder to have mass casualties with a knife, though.
definitely. I mean, they do. There is guns here, but it honestly, it's with gangs, drug dealers, and stuff. It's not. It's just not. You can't go to a supermarket and buy a gun. Yeah, that does definitely stop the mass shooting thing.
Yeah. I mean, I always, wonder about um the sort of escalation that all of that brings to, because, we've got here a lot of police forces are almost, militarized at this point, whereas if certain things weren't as readily available as they are, you probably wouldn't need police to have, basically like Bradleys or, whatever kind of tanks they might need, or, the various artillery that they might have now.
Well, Australia, they had a mass shooting in Tasmania, and after that they just banned guns and no mass shootings ever again. It's just, it. The thing I suppose. Well, I mean, maybe it's going a bit too political, and some of your listeners will get annoyed. But I think the thing that, from an outside point of view, that's annoying to read is that it's not, for me, it's not really about protection. I think you should just say that you like guns. I think I would be less annoyed by that, because I can't imagine in any scenario how it helps protect anyone. Because if it's out of a cabinet and not locked away, then yes, you might get a chance of getting the burglar that comes into your house to attack you. But then it's around like children, and accidents could happen, and if it is locked away in a gun cabinet and you have got a burglar, how the fuck are you going to get to a gun cabinet, unlock it, and then use it on a burglar? It just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, I think I've gone into a bit of a rant there, and might upset people. Please buy our records.
But I mean, I do have to agree with the point that, it does make more sense for people to just say, hey, I just am an enthusiast of the machinery of this weapon. And I do know a lot of people who own guns and who are into them, who are like upfront about the fact that they just have an appreciation for the machine itself.
Yep.
Because my favorite kind of like my favorite argument that I always kind of, poke holes in whenever I think it over in my head is the whole idea of needing them to defend yourself from the government, because if the government's decided it's going to come after you, like they don't even have to send a real person after you anymore. And if they did send a real person, they can send a sharpshooter that you'll never even know is there before you get shot.
I mean, is that really? I'm quite ignorant on this subject. Is that actually like a point of view? Because to me, you are not gonna. It doesn't matter how many assault rifles you buy. You're not going to overthrow the government. It's just a sheer. You're fucked. If they want you and they want you dead, you'll be dead. It's not. No amount of guns is going to solve that, sunshine. But yeah, I can understand the craft of it. And actually, I've got a couple of American friends, and she goes like shooting in like Colorado, and it looks really fun. Don't get me wrong. It does look fun. For as much as I don't think. I mean, it's not that it should be banned. It's just you shouldn't be able to just go in and buy a Gatorade and an assault rifle in the same place. That to me is the readily availableness without, all the. It just needs more, a bit more rules, guys. I think. Oh, and then you can just like have a nice time on a shooting range. That sounds great. But yeah, like a baby or a toddler like picking up a gun and killing their sister or whatever. Like that's not great. But yeah, I to judge anyway. I feel like we've really got into a political hole that's probably going to damage my reputation.
But at the same time, this is also a video of a masked man essentially saying, with great power, there should be great responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, I'm so lame. Yeah, I mean, yeah, who's likely to really listen to this guy in the mask, really? I still stand by it though, fuck it.
Yeah, well, I know that we're fast approaching the hour mark here. So is there anything else that you want to put out there?
I mean, just guys, just give it a listen if you want. If you've got this far into this interview, you should probably listen to it if you haven't already. If you have listened to it, then thank you very much. And if you have listened to it and liked it, thank you even more so. And if you didn't like it, then that's totally okay as well. I respect your opinion and free will to not enjoy my fucking masterpiece.
And I'll just reiterate that it is so far my favorite album that I've heard this year. It's been on steady repeat for the last 2 weeks since I got the promo of it.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And for all my self-confessed masterpiece, and I don't think it is, but I really, I'm very nervous about it coming out, and it's really wonderful to hear just those words. So thank you.
And thanks again for taking the time to chat today.
No, thank you.